This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. Hello and welcome to today's Critical Thought. Thank you to 803 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. Yesterday we finally broke 800 and another Let's Play vote has been announced. You have until next Tuesday, that is the 25th at midnight, to get your votes in. This poll will be, or your choices are going to be, the Hitman 2016 play, a look at the golden age of casual games with PopCap, or going through my list of the games that I just cannot get into. Today's Critical Thought actually comes with a little bit of a story for you folks. Last night I was thinking about all my plans for 2017 and how I've been pitching the idea of presentations and projects to the various libraries around here. And I had the existential crisis thinking, oh my god, I'm now actually going to have to put all that stuff together. And it gave me the idea for today's Critical Thought, a discussion of the two kinds of thinking that you need to do, not just as a game designer, but as any kind of creative individual. And they have to do with the concepts of high and low level thinking. It's also why there is no screenshot or example up there, because it's not really something we can have an example of. Both kinds of thinking are vital for the creative process and for being able to actually build something. And we'll start with high level because this is where I excel at. High level thinking is essentially the idea behind abstract or lateral thinking. It's about being able to come up with creative solutions. It's about being able to think of something that no one else has seen before, and being able to see that in your mind's eye and be able to start to come up with those concepts. It's where any number of great and unusual game ideas have come from. Everything from the crazy idea of managing flower-like creatures in an oversized garden of Pikmin, to brutally difficult platformers like Super Meat Boy, and etc. High level or lateral thinking is, again, it's about the creative process. This is when you're able to come up with an idea and start to be able to see it in your head. More importantly, you should be able to write a basic design document on a high level idea. For some designers and programmers, this can be very easy. For others, it can be difficult. Again, this is where that creative process comes in. And it can be challenging to even come up with an idea that's not only unique, but something that is doable. And when we talk about making something doable, that's when low-level thinking comes in. Low-level thinking is when it's time to put something to paper or to code. This is when it's no longer about thinking in terms of the abstract, but saying the literal elements. As an example, a high-level thought versus low-level when it comes to, let's say, building an actual building. The high level would be you sketching the concept pitch, what it's going to look like, what you envision it. Low-level thing would be actually saying it's going to be this amount of square feet, you're going to need this amount of materials, it's going to cost this amount of money, it's going to be designed just like this in terms of all the setup. Again, this is when you're no longer thinking about the abstract, but you're actually having to put something that will be used. When it comes to game design, this should be obvious. This is when we start talking about coding. Start talking about the programming logic that's going to go into your game. It's no longer about saying this character is going to jump a little bit high, or this is going to hurt a little bit. It's about coming up with the systems and the rules that are going to define your game. It's about saying when a character gets punched, he will take 2 points of damage out of his 5 points of health. He can pick up items for 1 point of health increase. If he runs out of health, we go to a game over screen or a checkpoint. Again, this is when we start getting into the meaty discussions. In a post I made, I think like a year or so ago, I talked about the two differences when it comes to a stealth game. So here's the example. Let's say we're building a stealth game about line of sight and noise. The high level thinking of this would be, this is a stealth game where players must hide from guards in the dark while not making too much noise. If the guard sees the player or hears the noise, they will come to investigate and attack the player. Now that's high level. Here's what it would sound like from a low-level discussion. And before we do this, please keep in mind, these numbers I'm going to bring up are simply examples. This is another abstract. These are not going to be hard numbers or, the guide to the perfect stealth game. So here we go. The low-level thinking would be this. I'm building a stealth game around avoiding the player avoiding the enemy's sight and the player not making noise. When the player is standing, they have a detection rating of 5, which means that they will be easier to spot than when they're crouching, which is at 2. If the enemy spots the player, an invisible bar will fill up that will determine when the enemy gets alerted. If it hits, let's say 20, that's when the enemy will spot the player. When the player is standing, obviously, it will grow faster than if they're crouching. In terms of sound, we run along similar concepts. When the player is walking, their footsteps are producing 4 points of sound audibility. When they're running, 7. When they're sneaking, 2. The enemy has a sound detection of, let's say, 15. And again, as the player makes noises, it will raise this invisible bar. When it fills up, the enemy will become alerted. When the player is standing, let's say they have a visibility of from 10 feet away that the enemy will spot, and their detection rating will go up. When they're crouching, let's say that drops to 4 feet. Now, as you can see, it took me a little bit longer to give that explanation than it did the high level. And that's the important point. You're no longer thinking about things simply as what they could be. It's time to start putting something together that will work for your game. When it comes to high level and low level thinking, there are specific times when you want to use one more than the other. When you're in the early proof of concept phase, the pre-prototype, you're simply just writing a design document, this is when high level thinking is going to be at its best. You're simply just trying to put something down. You're not even in the atmosphere or the galaxy of starting to put hard numbers to your concepts. You can start thinking like that, but remember, no design plan is going to survive intact from beginning to end. Things are going to change. As you iterate and prototype, numbers will have to be altered, stats will have to be tweaked, and even systems may be altered, changed, or flat out removed. But when you're simply still just thinking about the idea and what you want to do, you want to focus on the high level thinking. Again, this is the concept. This is what you hope your game to be. Now, low level thinking comes in when it's time to start building something. You can no longer describe your game as saying, again, I'm just going to make my character jump really high, or swords are stronger than axes. It's time to actually start thinking about how these mechanics will work and how the computer or engine will be built around them. This is when the exacts come in. While it's great to say that your game will have infinite replayability and, hundreds and thousands of different models, that may not be practical when you're actually building it. And when we talk about low-level thinking, this is when you have to start making realistic expectations and designs. Again, it will be amazing to design a game that has thousands of hours of replayability and randomly and procedurally generated content. But when it comes actual time to implement that and create it, it may not work so well. And again, this is where the design process gets tricky. I've spoken to so many developers about this, and when it's time to start quote-unquote finding the fun and trying to put all this stuff together into an actual product, it becomes very hard, and many games have fallen at this point. It's easy to sit here and talk about game ideas all day. Hell, if we didn't have a limit of about 15 to 20 minutes on these critical thoughts, I could sit here and talk until next week. In fact, for those of you watching this, while I'm recording this, I just did almost a 2.5 hour discussion with a developer about game design. It will go up soon, but again, these are discussions and concepts that can take a long time to develop. When it comes, for instance, I'll give you an idea or an example. One of my first design documents I wrote, I started to think about things in terms of low-level thinking, and I came up with the system for how resistances and how weapons will damage things will work out, using a system of basically rating the different kinds of damage and how they would impact the world. And again, this is when we start to get into very deep discussions. Now, to wrap up this critical thought, and again, we can talk who knows how long about this, I want to talk about the kinds of thinking and how this gets applied to game design, and specifically to being able to build this game up. As a game designer, as we've said before, there are many different hats you need to wear to build a game. It's not just about being a programmer, or an artist, or a writer. You need to know multiple aspects of it. And when you're making a game yourself, like I said, in today's world, it has become very easy to make games thanks to the power and the usability of engines. But you still need to have your mindset in different aspects, especially if you are the developer. If you want to build a game and write it and do the art for it, but have no interest in programming, it is possible to find people to help you. I'm sure right now there are who knows how many different people, especially coming out of college, or programmers looking for a project that they'll be more than happy to help, of course, get paid for it. But with that said, as a game designer, you still need to think both in terms of high and low level thinking. Even if you have no intention of doing any programming in your life, which if you can find people who will work for you, good on you. But you still need to be able to think in terms of the literal or the practical sense. More importantly, this is how you can communicate your ideas to programmers and to artists. A programmer is not going to take things like, it's going to be kind of like this, or make them hit extra hard, or make this be kind of weak. They're going to look at you like you're an idiot. You have to be able to describe your mechanics and your systems in the practical sense, or in the low-level sense. And building up your learning or your thinking like that can be difficult. Again, abstract and high-level thinking, we pretty much can do that on a day-to-day basis. Right now, I can think of 5 different ideas off the top of my head that I could talk about. But to build up your low-level thinking without having a hard background in programming can be difficult. It's not like other industries or products where if I want to learn carpentry, I can watch someone build something and I can get the idea for it. Or I can look at a structure and see how things are designed and how things are built in that front. The problem with game design is that it's bad design to show the low-level aspects. Even in strategy, 4X, and grand games which are built around multiple systems, you are very rarely going to see how the sausage is being made. Instead, designers will use abstracted concepts to show things. If you look at Civilization, for instance, there is a complex model that goes about, how culture is spread, how happiness grows, stuff like that. You never see that. You instead see things from a symbolic point of view. This building will give 2 happiness points. This building will cost 4 happiness points. And depending upon what your happiness rating is, will determine different bonuses and aspects. But again, you're not going to see most often those formulas. Which raises the question, how can you build your low-level thinking? It's kind of tricky. Strategy games are definitely good along those lines. Again, if they show you how the rules work or explain them, you can start to build how the AI responds, or figure out how things will work along those lines. Even if you, again, have no intention of programming, it's still good to take some kind of intro to programming course or talk to programmers about how things work. when you can start thinking about things in terms of AI behavior patterns or the formulas for how things are determined. This will start to help build your low-level thinking. In the past, I would recommend reading strategy guides, especially the ones that I brought up about, like double jump books, who show the formulas and the rules for how things work in the games from Nippon Ichi. This is a great way of understanding the low-level thinking, when you can start to see how these formulas are built, how they're applied to the game, and more importantly, how the AI will make use of them. But we are approaching almost 16 minutes, and I've done enough talking today, so we're going to wrap things up. Again, high-level and low-level thinking, two very important parts for a game designer to think about. And again, knowing when to use them and when to focus on one or the other, key parts for building a game. I hate to give like a little plug to myself, but if you look at how I discuss how I see the game behaves or how rules work, that's sort of the start for low-level thinking when I do my Let's Breaks or break down games like the Darkest Dungeon rules. But we're going to wrap things up here. Again, if we don't, I will be here for another hour. Thank you once again to 803 subscribers here on YouTube. If you're enjoying the content, be sure to subscribe as we make our way up to 900 and hopefully 1,000. You only have until the end of October to support Game Wisdom for the early bird rewards on Patreon. You can find me on Patreon under Game Wisdom, and any donations would help to allow me to support myself and add more great content for you folks to enjoy. Again, you have until October 31st to get in those early bird pricings. Otherwise, they will go away. Other than that, once again, I'm Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoyed today's Critical Thought. I will be back with more great content tomorrow, and I will see you all then. Take care. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course, share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.